Many of the product categories that we focus on, we always try to have a cost impact assessment so that you can look at, does this, if I switch to this green product, is it likely to cost more money? How can I reduce the upfront costs specifically? So for cleaning products, for example, it's important to look at how concentrated the product is so that you can get the cost savings, and then also looking at, are there ways that you can jump onto a cooperative purchasing agreement that may have negotiated better prices for some of those products. And then there's also calculators. Some of the calculators will enable you to do life cycle cost assessments and to document savings. We are collecting information across the country and putting it into a new guide called Saving Green, and documenting case studies across the country and across a broad range of product categories to demonstrate that in many, many cases, environmental purchasing can yield cost savings. So I wanted to just emphasize that there are a number of reasons why a purchasing program can end up resulting in cost savings. And so when you're looking at green purchasing, we tend, again, as we mentioned earlier, we're comparing one product to another. And so we need to make sure that procurement of products and services have a green alternative, but specifically one that meets performance requirements, because then if you have to use 3 times as much of a product, then that isn't cost effective, and it has to be at a competitive price. So some of the products are going to yield cost savings. Some of them are going to be green and be competitively priced. And so you at least want to make sure that they're not costing more money, and then you get an environmental advantage. This is consistent with traditional procurement procedures. So this is actually from the City of San Mateo's environmental purchasing policy. Nothing contained in this policy shall be construed as requiring a department or a contractor to procure products that do not perform adequately for their intended use, exclude adequate competition, and are not available at a reasonable price in a reasonable period of time. So if people are buying products, they often want to make sure that they're doing so within your traditional competitive bidding procedures. And so green purchasing policies typically will address this to say, look, if it's not available at a competitive price, or if it's not going to be available in time to meet your needs, then you don't have to buy green. So you want to just make sure that it's clear that green purchasing is done when it meets all these different criteria. So here's my list. Lower upfront costs. So some things are just going to be less expensive upfront. Something like a remanufactured toner cartridge is going to be less expensive. And so that would be a low-hanging fruit. Less expensive upfront, and you have the environmental benefits. Conserve energy and water, as Mary mentioned. So some things have tremendous energy savings. I brought some examples of LED light bulbs. So this can replace about a 60-watt light bulb, and it only uses 7 watts. And so you would need to look at the upfront cost of it, but it also, a typical light bulb will last 1,000 hours. This one lasts 20,000 hours. So it's 20 times as long of a life. So you can start to calculate those things into looking at the total life costs of a product. Reducing paper use, reducing fuel use, so that gets into your vehicles. Also looking at a duplexing printer. So there might be an upfront cost increase to have that function onto it, but then you start to calculate the cost savings from the paper consumption, and it can pay off relatively quickly. Lower maintenance costs. So this is somewhat associated with the longer life. So every time a custodial worker needs to get up on the ladder or need to bring in a contractor to change out the light bulb, there's a cost associated with that. So maintenance costs can be very, very important. We've heard some products, the maintenance cost savings alone can make the difference in terms of the product being desirable. So for example, LED street lighting, for example, just the extended life means that you're not going to have to send workers out on a truck to go replace lighting systems and things like that. Lower replacement costs, so just the number of times, again with the LED light bulb, and I'll show some other examples. So this is an extended life toner or ink cartridge. So it lasts about twice as long. So you can, even though it didn't cost twice as much, it can give you savings because you're not going to have to replace it as often. Avoiding disposal costs, avoiding cleanup costs. So particularly things that have hazardous materials, that can be very expensive. I was at a meeting with the City of San Francisco last week, and it was announced in this meeting, it was a meeting to work on their new lighting contract, which is high efficiency, low mercury, long-lasting lighting equipment, and it was mentioned that the cost of recycling the compact fluorescent light bulbs now is as much or higher as the cost of buying it in the first place. So for certain types of items, batteries being another one, paint being another one, those are products where the end-of-life disposal costs can be quite significant. So having rechargeable batteries or LEDs that last longer, all these things can substantially contribute to lower disposal costs and should be incorporated into the decisions about which products to purchase. Supporting the local and regional economy. This is something that is becoming more and more important as we realize that we have businesses here, but if we're buying our products that are either distributed from another place or manufactured somewhere else, that we're not contributing to our tax base. And so looking at products like remanufactured toner cartridges that can be manufactured locally, that creates jobs. And when you're creating jobs, you're supporting more tax money going into the local economy, and that's a benefit to the local and state and federal government. And this is actually the point that you were getting at, which is offsetting environmental and health program costs, and there's more in that. One of the examples would be school districts, for example. They spend substantial amounts of money treating children who have asthma. So does it make sense for the school district to be using cleaning products that have chemicals in them that can trigger asthma attacks? And so there is some evidence that if they switch to cleaning products that do not contain asthmagens and other chemicals of concern, that it could reduce the numbers of asthma attacks among children in school. Now, those are tricky types of things to document. It's generally easier to document those types of things among workers. Some of the healthcare facilities are documenting the costs that it takes for them to train workers to deal with mercury-containing products. So it could be, it used to be mercury thermometers, mercury blood pressure devices. Every time they use one of those products, the worker needs to be trained in order to deal with, well, what happens if it breaks and there's a spill? And then the cost of the spill can be quite significant. So some of those costs can be incorporated into the life cycle cost assessment, and some are easier to document than others. Low bidder versus the best value. So traditional procurement has been based on what's the cheapest thing that I can get and just going in there. This just shows sometimes the lowest bidder just isn't the way to go. So I live with a little 8-year-old boy, and he would love to have, all the buildings made out of Lincoln logs. We need to make sure that there's a quality in terms of performance and quality in terms of environmental impacts. And so increasingly there's now a movement towards use of best value. And best value can take into consideration the life cycle costs for energy and replacement cartridges and paper for different types of equipment. So some people will say to me, well, we can't do green purchasing because we have to just buy the thing with the lowest price. And generally, the policies allow for the lowest price among things that meet a certain specification, and that specification can include performance and can include environmental attributes. So you could say, we want to have the lowest price of copy paper that has at least 30% post-consumer recycled content, meets state and federal minimum recycled content guidelines. Then you just make the things compete on that level playing field. Best value procurement favors efficient products because it does consider these overall life cycle costs, like we talked about. And it's the total cost of ownership is another term for it as well, and you want to calculate that. So it does take into consideration initial price as well as any of the energy and water costs, the maintenance costs, the labor and replacement costs, and the end-of-life disposal and recycling costs. So again, here we have the example of the LED light bulb, which is going to replace 20 incandescent light bulbs. And so it can end up between that and the maintenance savings, the replacement, and just the replacement cost itself can end up having a better value than incandescent light bulbs. So I'm going to give you some examples just to show that. Again, here's the LED light bulb. The important thing to note is that there is now an ENERGY STAR rating for LED lighting, even for the screw-in light bulbs. And so to make sure that you get a high quality product and one that's going to meet minimum efficiency standards, it's best to require any light bulbs that you have that are LEDs to be on the contract. So in the lighting contract, and we're going to talk about lighting at the next series of workshops, but traditionally, LEDs haven't been on contract, so there's more and more jurisdictions that are working hard to get those on contracts and to negotiate hard to bring that upfront price down, and that's part of the procurement strategy. Again, you get the efficiency savings, 75% less energy than incandescents, longer life. They're even 3 times more long-lasting than CFLs, 2 to 3 times. And again, mercury-free, so you don't have that end-of-life disposal problem. You can see there's a qualified list of ENERGY STAR. So if you were to go out and say we want to have ENERGY STAR lighting equipment, and you wanted to check whether the vendor is bidding you a product that actually meets that standard, you can go to the ENERGY STAR list to make sure that it's on the list. The important thing about this slide is that there are some things that have the immediate savings, like remanufactured toner cartridges, like getting rid of bottled water, as we heard earlier. And then some things have low savings through lower operating costs, particularly energy efficient products. Some things have savings through the repurchasing, meaning that they have a longer life, like rechargeable batteries or microfiber mops. Some are equivalently priced, and so you get the green benefit, but it's not going to have a higher cost. Certain green cleaners, for example, and then other types of furniture, things that are relatively available in the marketplace are tending to start being competitively priced. And then higher cost items, there might be, so recycled copy paper, actually typically now the 30% is relatively cost competitive. It's when you go into maybe 100% recycled that you would have a higher cost to that product. And things like organic food, compostable dishware. But even some of these items, you can get a cost savings if you can then recycle your food scraps, for example, with the compostable food service ware, and then you can get a savings by lowering your tipping fees. There are a few communities that actually document their cost savings associated with their green purchasing. One is King County, Washington. King County is in Seattle, that region, and they're a leader in sustainable purchasing. Every year they do a report, and in 2010 they reported that they purchased $41 million in environmentally preferable products with a savings of about $1 million. And so they identify the products, and again, this is your low-hanging fruit here. So aggregates would be recycling the road material, and they can just recycle it as they go along. Tire retreading, toner cartridges. One thing I just think is amazing, if you look at this, here's a county, okay, relatively big county. They have a full-time green purchasing coordinator. They're saving about $200,000 a year just on buying remanufactured toner cartridges. It pays for their entire green purchasing program every year. Green cleaners they've documented save money, re-refined motor oil and antifreeze, so all told about $1 million a year in savings. So I'm going to talk about some of these individual products, and you can see where the savings come from. Santa Clara County, I also wrote down some of their savings. Now, the interesting thing that's different about this is a lot of these savings were gained through the centralization. So for example, it says they saved about $55,000 in recycled content trash bags. So Santa Clara County went from some of their bags being compliant, some not, and buying from various different vendors. Each department was buying from a different vendor, or they were buying from the same vendor but getting different prices. And when they aggregated together, they ended up getting recycled content trash bags. So even some of the ones that they were getting before, because they had an aggregated buy with all the different departments, they were getting a better price per trash bag and saved $55,000 a year. Same for some of these other products, recycled content paper towels, toilet paper, and green cleaning chemicals. Buying local, there was a lot of discussion about local. Where this is really coming in addition to things like remanufactured toner cartridges, is food. There's a lot of food policies out there, and I know that actually the county has been working on a food policy. San Francisco has one. Here's one case study of a county up in Oregon near Portland area. They did an experiment in their correctional facility. How much local produce, eggs, dairy can they get locally without having a price premium? And their answer was 45%. And so they adopted through their correctional facility a program, and they felt that it was really important to be creating jobs in the community as part of the correctional facility, and they really saw a connection there. How do you pay for products that have the high upfront cost, which is one of your original questions? So, just pointing out, some things don't have a higher upfront cost. And really looking at competitively bidding, how do you get that upfront cost down through the use of some of those cooperative purchasing agreements, aggregating demand within your departments to really do that. Reducing consumption, that's another way, like with the paper. You can buy more expensive recycled paper, but you really are focusing on reducing consumption. There may be some revolving loans, and there are some interesting examples of small jurisdictions that have set up small revolving loan funds to pay for the cost, and then when the savings come in, to do that. And I've seen even individual departments that have done that, where they just have dedicated money and then gotten the cost savings back. There may be some grants available. Utility rebates, particularly for things like exit signs. That actually looks like it might be an incandescent exit sign. So in some cases you can get substantial rebates to help pay for those things. Anything that has an energy savings is likely to be some kind of an energy efficiency rebate. For bigger projects, sometimes you can find and contract with a company that will pay the higher upfront costs, and then they share the savings back with the jurisdiction. Those are for bigger projects, like you would retrofit all the lighting in a building, for example, or doing like a renewable energy solar panels or something for a piece of equipment. And life cycle budgeting, this is just a little bit more challenging to look at how do you justify the higher costs and then try to figure out how to get it paid back when there's a higher upfront cost. And that can be really challenging, actually. I don't have all the answers for higher upfront costs. But sometimes you can set up a system where you can get the savings associated with recycling or the rebates associated with that. I would also say really looking at competitively bidding. You can often get products that by really doing a better job, if you're buying it individually using a purchase order, if you can get onto a cooperative contract or a county contract, you may be able to get the green product at an equivalent price. Greening your market basket, this is what I was talking about earlier, where if you're involved with a contract situation, that often you are negotiating the contract around a certain market basket or core list of items. Often there's very few green products in there. And so the core list of items then ends up getting really steeply discounted, and the green products then don't. So if you can basically negotiate your contracts around the green products, you can drive the price down. You can remove non-green products from core market basket items as well, so that then the less expensive thing doesn't end up getting the better discount. Now, I've seen lots of amazing examples. Actually, San Francisco at one point decided to ban all single-use batteries. They have an ordinance, and they really went out to bid and got really great prices, almost the identical price for rechargeable batteries that they were paying for single-use batteries, because they really just gave a big volume estimate to those products. Same thing they did for light bulbs. They got rid of some of the shorter life fluorescent light bulbs. They went with the longer life ones, and because they were able to standardize on that one product, they got essentially the equivalent price for those products as they were for the other ones. When the manufacturers and vendors have to stock every single different type of thing, and you're only buying stuff in little bits, it makes it harder and more expensive for them to fill your order. So if you really just say, we want the greener thing, you can often end up, because you're buying more of it, get a better price break. So it's a little bit of a leap of faith. Here you can piggyback on somebody else's contract. As I mentioned earlier, Santa Clara County is saving about $40,000 a year by procuring re-refined motor oil using San Jose's contract. And that's because they were originally buying all their motor oil off of purchase agreements, individual purchase agreements month after month. They weren't getting good price breaks. They ended up pretty much the same vendor, but they just got a better price on the product. You might be able to find green products on the state contracts. There's some interesting municipal collaborations. This is one City of San Jose did with renewable energy. They were finding local governments were having a hard time buying solar panels. So they set up a whole program and brought in a number of jurisdictions together, and they were able to get lower prices on the panels. They got lower prices on the installation and site assessment services, and they got better deals on the financing by having more than a dozen jurisdictions that went in together on this cooperative purchasing. And apparently they're going out again, and this is a model which is now being duplicated in DC and other municipal areas to have group purchases for renewable energy. It's a very exciting project that if you're interested in renewable energy, you can read about. There is a system in the region to try to help one local government learn about another local government's bid for green products. And it's something that's pretty much still in the pilot beta testing. The idea is that there's a website. So if somebody was going to go out to bid for LEDs or for green cleaning products, they could then go onto this website. It's called the Public Environmentally Preferable Purchasing System. Julie, you probably know even more about it than I do. And you could say, oh, I'm interested in that too. Let me in on that. So then you're not just aggregating within your jurisdiction, but you're having several jurisdictions that are all going out to bid for the same product category. And that not only aggregates the quantity, but it it saves time because you don't have to figure out the specs on your own. So there's a database for that, and this just shows how you log in, you click on the menu bar, and then you look at the different aggregates of different product types. There's a Bay Area Green Purchasing Network that we are part of, and the county is part of through the Association of Bay Area Governments that is sharing information and helping to try to make it easier for everyone.